The wind that swept across the Kansas plains that morning carried no mercy. It came dry and restless, picking up dust and memories as it went, swirling them together in a haze that made the world feel blurred and far away. Eliza Whitmore knelt in the red clay, her fingers trembling as she pressed the last handful of dirt onto the small grave. The cross she'd carved from 2 broken fence posts leaned slightly to one side, and the name she'd burned into it, Ruthie Whitmore, beloved daughter, was already fading under the grit of the wind. Her heart had no rhythm anymore, only the hollow ache that came after too much crying. The fever had taken Ruthie quick, just 3 days of burning skin and delirium, and then her small body went still in Eliza's arms. Her husband, John, had died the same way the winter before. The doctor said it was consumption, but Eliza believed it was the war that killed him in the end, the nightmares, the ghosts that followed him home from Virginia, the silence that settled in him like frost. Now there was no one left. Just her, the cabin they'd built with their hands, and a few acres of stubborn soil that refused to grow more than weeds and wild onions. She sat back on her heels, her black shawl whipping around her shoulders, and whispered a prayer she no longer believed anyone could hear. "Rest easy, my little girl. Mama's here." The crunch of wagon wheels broke the fragile stillness. Eliza froze. The sound came from the ridge, rough laughter, the clatter of reins. 3 riders crested the hill and came into view, the late sun glinting off their belt buckles and rifles. She knew them before they spoke. Frank Carter, broad-shouldered and smug, led the way. His younger brothers, Wade and Tom, followed close behind. The Carters owned the ranch to the south, a sprawl of green pasture that had grown while everyone else's farms dried up. Frank tipped his hat mockingly as they rode closer. "Afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore. Shame about the girl. Real shame." Eliza rose slowly, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "You've got no business here, Frank." He smirked. "Well, that's the thing. I reckon we do." He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and waved it lazily. "See, taxes weren't paid on this property last spring. County auctioned it off. We bought it fair and square." Eliza blinked, her heart thudding. "That's a lie. I sent the money through the postmaster in May. I have the receipt." Frank's grin widened, cruel and careless. "Funny thing about paper, ma'am. It gets lost easy, especially when a widow's got no one to vouch for her." Wade chuckled. "Reckon you'll find somewhere else to dig holes." Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. "You can't just take what's not yours." Frank leaned down from his horse, his voice dropping low. "This land don't belong to you anymore. You've got until sundown tomorrow to clear out. After that, we'll be moving our herd through." For a moment, the only sound was the dry rattle of the grass. Then, as they turned their horses, Frank called over his shoulder, "And you might want to say goodbye to the little grave proper like. We'll be plowing this section first." They rode off laughing, their dust settling on the fresh mound of earth like an insult. Eliza stood there for a long time, frozen between rage and despair. The edges of the world blurred again, this time not from wind or dust, but from the tears that finally broke loose. She dropped to her knees beside the grave and pressed her forehead to the cross. "They won't take you, baby," she whispered. "They won't take this place." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. She had no power to stop them. The nearest lawman was 2 towns over, and the Carters had friends in every office worth having. When the sun began to fall, she gathered her things, the broken hoe, the bucket, the tin cup, and walked slowly back toward the cabin. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind was on fire. She thought of John, of how he'd fought for what was right even when it nearly broke him. He wouldn't have let them steal what they'd built. The stranger rode closer as the last rays of sun fell behind the hills. Eliza stood on the porch, her hands gripping the edge of the railing, heart pounding in her chest. When he dismounted, his boots hit the dirt with a dull thud. Up close, she saw he wasn't young, maybe 40, maybe more, with the look of someone who'd ridden too far and seen too much. His coat was dusty, the brim of his hat low, but when he looked up, his eyes were clear and steady, the color of gathering thunder. "Evenin', ma'am," he said quietly, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to startle you. Name's Cole Merrick. I was headin' south before sundown and saw some men ride off. Figured it wasn't a social call." Eliza studied him, cautious. "Strangers didn't stop for widows out here unless they wanted something." "You figured right," she said finally. "They came to take what isn't theirs." Cole's gaze flicked toward the small grave by the oak tree, and his voice softened. "Your child?" Eliza nodded once, the lump in her throat too hard to speak around. He looked down at the dirt, then back at her. I'm sorry for your loss. No one deserves to bury their own. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, unwilling to show weakness. Sorry doesn't change much, Mr. Merrick. The Carters mean to have my land. Said the taxes weren't paid, but I sent the money months ago. Cole's expression darkened. Frank Carter's name come up. Her brow furrowed. You know him. He exhaled slowly, almost like he'd been expecting it. I know the kind. That man's left a trail of folks with empty hands and burned homes. He's got a friend in the county office, a clerk who loses the tax receipts and sells the land cheap to Carter. Happens too often for coincidence. Eliza felt anger rising through her grief like a hot tide. And no one stops him. Hard to stop a man who buys the law along with the land, Cole said. His tone was steady, but his hand flexed once near the revolver on his hip. The wind picked up again, snapping the old curtains that hung in her window. Eliza turned away, suddenly ashamed of the hopelessness in her voice. Then I suppose I'll pack what I can and leave in the morning. Cole didn't move. He studied the horizon, his face unreadable. You said you paid in May. Yes. Then the records exist somewhere. County office keeps 2 copies, one for the file, one for the ledger. Only way both disappear is if someone makes them disappear. Eliza glanced at him. And how would you know that? He gave a faint, tired smile. I used to be a lawman. County marshal out of Abilene. Until politics got dirtier than crime. That surprised her. There was a steadiness in his posture, a kind of quiet authority she hadn't recognized until now. Why are you here? She asked softly. This road doesn't lead south. Not unless you're lost. Cole looked out across the darkening plains, where the light was fading fast. Maybe I was, he said. Until now. They spoke little after that. Eliza invited him to stay by the fire, more out of decency than trust. He removed his hat, brushed the dust from his coat, and sat by the hearth as she boiled coffee and sliced what little bread she had left. When she handed him a cup, their fingers brushed, rough meeting rough, and for a moment, she felt something stir she hadn't allowed herself to feel since John died, the sense that someone else might stand beside her, even if only for a while. He drank, quietly, eyes on the flames. Tell me about your husband, he said finally. She hesitated. John was a soldier, fought for the Union. When he came home, he wanted peace, just a bit of land, a roof, a place for Ruthie to run. Her voice cracked. We worked hard. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Cole nodded, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. Men like John built this country, Mrs. Whitmore. Men like Carter just feed off it. They sat in silence for a while after that. Outside, the wind died down, and the world grew still. Eliza felt the ache in her chest ease slightly, soothed by the presence of someone who understood loss, not through pity, but through the scars it left behind. When morning came, Cole was already saddled. The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon when Eliza stepped out to find him tightening his reins. You're leaving? She asked, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Going to town, he said simply. Need to see a man about some missing records. Her eyes widened. You can't. But he stopped her with a calm look. I can. And I will. Don't let anyone near the property while I'm gone. Before she could reply, he was already riding off into the sunrise, a trail of dust rising behind him. Eliza watched until he was no more than a speck on the horizon, her heart caught between fear and hope. Hours passed. She chopped wood, mended what she could, tried not to watch the road. The day stretched long, every creak of the wind making her jump. By late afternoon, she began to wonder if she'd ever see him again. Then, hoofbeats. She looked up from the porch as 3 riders approached, the Carters, flanked by 2 deputies. Frank Carter dismounted with his usual smirk. Didn't I tell you, widow? Sundown, you're gone. Before she could answer, another figure appeared from behind the barn, Cole Merrick, his coat dust-covered, holding a folded paper high in his hand. His voice rang out, calm but cutting through the air like thunder. Not today, Frank. The moment Cole Merrick stepped from behind the barn, the air seemed to tighten. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the ground, glinting off the polished star pinned to his chest, half hidden beneath his coat but unmistakable. His voice carried with the steady weight of authority that only a man used to being obeyed possessed. Not today, Frank, he said again, tossing a folded document onto the ground between them. It landed in the dust at Carter's boots, the wax seal of the county clerk catching the light. Frank's smirk faltered. What's this supposed to be? Cole dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the dirt. That's the original tax record, the one your friend in the clerk's office conveniently misplaced. It shows that Mrs. Whitmore paid in full, and right on time. Frank's jaw tightened, but he gave a short, mocking laugh. And you expect me to take your word for it? Cole's eyes didn't waver. You don't have to take my word. Sheriff Talbot signed it himself. Clerk's already in custody. I rode back with the judge's order. The two deputies exchanged uncertain glances, clearly caught between their employer and the lawman standing before them. Frank stepped closer, his hand twitching near his belt. You think waving some paper around changes anything? This land's mine. We bought it fair. Cole's voice turned quiet, too quiet. No, you stole it. Like you stole half this county from folks who couldn't fight back. But this time, you picked the wrong grave to trample. Eliza stood behind him, her hands gripping the porch rail, hardly daring to breathe. She could feel the tension between the two men coil like a rattlesnake about to strike. Frank sneered, "You've got no badge here, Merrick. No authority. I heard you got run out of Abilene." Cole's mouth curved into a cold half-smile. "That's true. Didn't have the stomach for politics anymore. But I still know the law, and I still know how to enforce it." Wade Carter shifted uneasily in his saddle. "Frank, maybe we oughta." But Frank cut him off with a glare. "Shut it." He turned back to Cole, fury flashing in his eyes. "You come riding in here like some kind of savior, but you don't scare me. You're just another drifter playing hero for a widow." Cole's hand moved, fast as lightning. In one smooth motion, he drew his revolver and cocked the hammer, pointing it square at Frank's chest. "You're right about one thing," he said, his tone icy and even. "I'm just passing through, but before I go, I'm setting things right." For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. The deputies, hands hovered near their holsters but didn't draw. They'd seen enough men die to know what that look in Cole Merrick's eyes meant. Finally, Frank broke first. He raised his hands slightly, stepping back. "Fine, have it your way, but this isn't over." "It's over," Cole said flatly. "You and your brothers are done here. The judge will see to that." Wade and Tom turned their horses reluctantly, glancing back once before spurring away. Frank mounted up last, spitting into the dirt. "You think you've won something, Merrick? The world doesn't care about widows or has-been marshals." Cole holstered his gun with a calm, deliberate motion. "No, maybe it doesn't. But we still do." With that, the Carters rode off, their silhouettes shrinking against the horizon until they were swallowed by dust and distance. Silence settled again, heavy, almost unreal. The only sound was the creak of leather as Cole turned to face Eliza. His expression had softened, though the hardness of his jaw remained. "You're safe now," he said simply. Eliza stepped down from the porch, her skirts brushing the dirt. "Safe," she repeated softly, as if testing the word. "I thought I'd forgotten what that felt like." Cole looked toward the small grave, his hat twisting in his hands. "You shouldn't have to fight this hard just to keep what's yours." She followed his gaze, her eyes filling with tears. "Why did you come back?" she asked. "You could have ridden on, let them take it." He hesitated, voice low. "Because I know what it feels like to bury a child and lose everything afterward. My wife and boy, smallpox took them 5 winters ago. When they were gone, I stopped caring about anything. Rode from town to town, looking for something worth standing for again." Eliza's breath caught. "And you think that's here? With me?" Cole met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I don't know, but I know this land deserves someone who'll fight for it, someone who still remembers what love looks like, even when it hurts." The words sank into her like rain into dry earth. For the first time in so long, she felt something loosen inside her chest, a slow, cautious warmth pushing against the grief. The sky was burning orange now, the prairie glowing under the light of a fading day. Cole turned toward his horse. "I'll stay a few days. Make sure they don't come back. After that, I'll be moving on." Eliza stepped closer. "You don't have to go so soon." He looked at her for a long moment before replying, voice gentle. "I reckon some souls are meant to keep moving. But maybe I'll linger longer than planned." As dusk deepened into twilight, they stood side by side, a widow who had lost everything, and a drifter who'd given up on finding anything at all.